Hi, my name is Edie. I was diagnosed with 3B colorectal cancer in March of 2021. Just turned 54 years old in October. I live in a suburb of Philadelphia. Um, I have a 21-year-old daughter who's in college at the University of Delaware. I currently work full-time as a director for an early intervention agency. We provide in-home therapies for children birth to age 3 with special needs. I will be retiring at the end of 2025. I have a pug and just loving life right now. My story, it was kind of in hindsight that the symptoms I was having are clearly related to my cancer. But, for a year or two before my diagnosis, I was noticing really bad constipation. But I chalked it up to medication and scoliosis that I have and anything else because I was feeling fine otherwise. And I'd never had any health issues, so it didn't even occur to me to think it could be something serious. But I was lucky in that I turned 50 and my doctor said, since I don't have any risk factors or history in my family of colon cancer, it was, that age. So he said, start with the Cologuard test. So I did the Cologuard and it came back positive, and I thought it was just a false positive. I had no concerns. But he said, since it's positive, you need a colonoscopy. So I scheduled that. It was for March 29th, 2021. And when I woke up, I was in a little private room with the doctor, which I now realize isn't normal. Usually you just wake up in the same kind of bay you were in before you went back. So she had pictures and she started telling me that there was a mass, and she didn't mention the word cancer, but she said I would need to have it removed, and they did biopsies, so she would get back to me, but I needed to schedule some testing and the removal. So I still was worried, but I wasn't quite thinking cancer because she hadn't said it. I just thought it was a mass. So went home, started making appointments for different CT scans and things, and they were about a month out. And then a few days later, the oncologist called me at work, the GI doctor, and said, like we thought, it's cancer. So, you'll need to get all these tests done, and we'll move forward with kind of looking into treatment, getting an oncologist. So, I was in shock. I didn't, because, she said, like, we thought it's cancer, but I'm like, who's we? Because I didn't know that. So someone a little bit later that afternoon, very nicely from her office, called me back and just nonchalantly like moved all my appointments up to the next week, all my scans and all of the tests. So that was my first thought that, oh, this is serious. So got all the scans done, PET scan, CAT scan, MRI, all the different scans. And it, then they classified it as rectal cancer because it was on the border of rectum and colon, but for treatment purposes, they classified it as rectal cancer because they do something called neoadjuvant treatment for that, where you do the chemo and the chemo radiation before to try to shrink the tumor as much as possible. So when they do remove it, hopefully you preserve as much functioning as possible. When I took the test, I didn't know anything about it. I just followed the directions. But when it came back positive, I started doing some Googling. And, my Googling was really like, what is the percentage of false positives? And it was, 12 or 13 or 11, something like that. I thought, well, that's it. It's a false positive. But I didn't really understand then how it worked. And I'm not even sure I do now. I know it's looking for either blood or some sort of DNA in the stool. But yeah, I am not sure because that got like left in the dirt with all the other tests and things that I found out. After all the scans, I met with the oncologist that was assigned, and he kind of pulled all the test results into like the story of my cancer, which I named. I named my tumor lump-free because it was less scary to talk to it about lump-free than the tumor. So it sounded like a pathetic name. So told all about lump-free. It really was caught just in time. It was a pretty big tumor almost all the way around. It was through the colon wall into the fat, into the blood vessels. I had a few suspicious lymph nodes as well. So the course that he recommended was getting a port. And he said, you're welcome to a second opinion. But I said, I just want to get started. This is a cancer. It has like a pretty set like treatment plan. So just let's get started with it. So get a port. Then, so that was April 5th, I think. So March 29th was the colonoscopy. April 5th was the meeting with him. I think on like the week after that, I got the port. And by the end of April, I was in the chemo chair. So before they really decided on the plan, Abramson has a tumor board, which is great. So they discussed my case just to make, it's always what, do you do chemo first or do you do radiation first? And because I had some lymph nodes that were suspicious, they did the chemo first to kind of knock it out of there before trying to shrink the tumor anymore with the radiation. So I had 8 rounds of a chemotherapy called Folfox. So I was every other week for 8 sessions. I was in the chair for a few hours getting an infusion, and then I would get hooked up to a portable pump for the next 48 hours that had 5FU in it. So I did something. I'm a researcher, so I tried to stay away from Dr. Google about symptoms and things, but I researched like how to deal with treatment, and I heard about something called icing, where you put ice on your hands and your feet during your infusions because Folfox can cause some pretty severe cold sensitivity and some neuropathy. People say icing doesn't help with neuropathy, but I swear it does because I really made it out with hardly any. And I would suck on ice for each infusion. And other than that, my symptoms, the first day or two after I got disconnected from the pump, I was feeling just kind of yucky. I used to say I'd feel pickled, just itchy eyes, like a cold was coming on. But then after a few days, I'd rally. I mean, in between sessions, I went to Santa Monica with my daughter. We flew and everything. So I had my session on a Friday with chemo. Wednesday to Wednesday, we were away. And then Friday, I was back in the chemo chair. So I tolerated treatment overall very, very well. I didn't have any adverse reactions. My immune system went down, but I never got sicker than any usual. So I did the 8 sessions of chemo, ended that in like July or August of 2021. I had a couple of months break, and then early September I started the radiation. And that's a weird little thing to get ready for because you go for your session for them to get you all lined up, and they do your little tattoo dots so they can line up the radiation the same way. And TMI, but I'm laying there and she put like some kind of magnetic sticker on my butt to mark there on the x-ray. So she just put a sticker? She did. Okay. So a lot of weird experiences with colon cancer. But yeah, I had 28, 26 sessions. So every weekday for 6 weeks, go down. They line you up, they do the thing, and you're out. So every morning. I didn't have many side effects from that either. A little bit of like sunburn feeling on my skin like the first time or two, but then that went away. Towards the very end, I started to get some GI symptoms, but by then the radiation was ending. And so that went away quickly. And it was chemo radiation. There was no more cancer in my lymph nodes, so those weren't suspicious anymore. And the tumor had shrunk about 50%, but there was still like tumor signal there. And then after the radiation, it looked like a near total response. Lumfrey looked like he was totally gone. In chemo, every 2 weeks, I get my blood work done before doing the chemo because they have to check your levels to make sure you were strong enough for it. But they did the CEA each time, and it went down like significantly each time. So by the time I was done chemo and chemo radiation, it was down to like 6 point something. And it looked like a total response. So in my mind, I'm thinking like, do I still have surgery? Do I not? I'd rather have surgery just to be safe. But the next time they did the blood work, my CEA had started to creep up again. So I knew it was not all gone. So that made it easy to decide on surgery. So I was done with the chemo radiation in mid-October, and they let me go through the holidays and with no treatment. And then mid-January, I had my lower anterior resection. And I had a temporary ileostomy while I healed. So, I went through all the appointments to kind of learn about that and for them to mark me and where to put it. But I had a lot of problems with that. So the surgery itself, I healed from great. And all the lymph nodes they checked were negative. And the margins were not like the cleanest. One of the closest edges was like 2 millimeters from, like they could only get like 2 millimeters clear of the cancer because of just where everything was. So that worried me, but nothing's come of that so far. But the ostomy itself was formed, unfortunately, poorly, so it was very, very hard to keep a bag on. So they rushed the reversal on that. So 7 weeks, and I had the reversal done. So, and since then, like, not many impacts. Like, there are differences, but it doesn't affect my day-to-day life, which is good. And since then, so it was basically a year. March of 2021 to March of 2022, all the treatments, all the surgeries were done. And everything since then has been clean. I've had actually 3 colonoscopies since then, because I had my annual one and there was something that they couldn't quite get a hold of to check. So I had to have like another one to check that out. And then I just had my second annual one about 3 or 4 months ago, and that went well. And I have scans. I got scans every 3 months for a while. Now they're every 6 months. So everything's been clear. One thing that was very helpful when I was trying to figure out how to like find a system that would work for me, because there's all kinds of different like wafers and bags and all kinds of setups. And all the different companies like Hollister, and I forget the name of the companies, but if you call them, they are more than happy to send you samples. I don't know if you know the marshmallow trick, but like when it's time to change your bag, one, it's good to do it kind of first thing in the morning before you've eaten anything, because things aren't very active. But you can also eat a couple of marshmallows, I think 20 or 30 minutes beforehand, and that kind of slows everything or stops everything up. So that's a little trick. But overall, I was really nervous about it also. And if it weren't for it being so poorly formed, like it really wouldn't have been that hard to take care of. So I was surprised, especially me who had like such a nondescript medical history. And then I went through this crazy year, and now I've had this nondescript medical history since then. But, even though I was like 50 years old, I'd never really thought much about death and, dying. And then have a year where like that is what I cried every day, at least once in the car, just thinking about it. And for myself, like I lived a good life. I felt like I'd done a lot that I wanted to do, but my daughter was 17 when I got diagnosed, and I did not want that to be her story, that she lost her mother when she was young. So I did like a video kind of blog of myself all the way through, kind of showing like, here's my body now before any of the things. And then, here I am with ostomy. And so it's interesting to look back on, but also to see kind of the progress emotionally. Like, from the first like the hardest time was the time between the colonoscopy and the knowing my plan, like knowing you have cancer, but not having a plan or having started anything or knowing what your chances are. That's a hard time. But since then, I'm not a religious person at all. So I never really thought of death. Didn't really like believe in an afterlife or anything. It's just all fine and good until you're staring death in the face for a whole year. And then it seems pretty bleak, like just click, you're gone. So I wrestled with that for a while, and tried to think of ways like, okay, but we're energy. So energy lives on. So in some way, but finally I put on a message board about like, is it really just life itself is so amazing? Like, who would have thought that like everything would exist, cell phones and grass and all the stuff that exists. So it is really so amazing to think that there might be something after. But I realized since I won't know, I just don't think about it. Like, why am I wasting time thinking about something I will never know? Just enjoy the moment. Don't think about death. It's coming for all of us. So just enjoy the moment, and whatever happens after will happen. That part I just put into perspective like within the last month. So that was really like messing with my head. But yeah, someone did a good story about what it's like to have cancer, and they likened it to kind of like you open a refrigerator one day and there's like a tiger in there, but then when the tiger's gone, you still are like scared to open the fridge, and maybe one day there's a little cub in there, and that's like the polyps, and then it comes all back again, every little ache and pain. I mean, I had pain in my elbow, which I realized is like tennis elbow. But my first thought was like, is there a tumor in my elbow? Like my elbow. I was worried about that. But yeah, it kind of took away, any kind of feeling of invincibility for sure. But on the reverse side, I'm happy and thankful for every experience in life, and things really don't get to me. It takes a lot to get to me. It's just like, whatever, that'll work out, or like nothing really can stress me out much anymore. One thing that helped me is, in life you find your tribe in different ways, whether it's, when I first had my daughter, I found a tribe of other moms with similar lived experience. And I've gotten a lot of help from like finding my like cancer tribe. I'm on Reddit groups for colon cancer, and there's a whole Facebook group called Colon Town. I've gone on retreats. There's so many. I've done research about, there's one called Epic Experience. It's in Colorado. They have a camp and they have regional activities. So really getting together with people who know what it's like. And, everyone else in your life, rightly so, they move on from it. And, they'll listen, but they don't really get like, it's still so much a factor. I think about it every day. But people who have had, cancer experiences themselves, it's really nice to kind of talk to them. And, I've learned that there's nothing that makes faster friends than shared cancer experience. You will share any detail, no matter how personal, and listen to anything, no matter how emotional, because they get it. They said my cancer was probably like growing for like 20 years, which is so creepy to think about. But so definitely get the screenings. If you are having symptoms and your doctor is like poo-pooing them, no pun intended, like go and push and advocate for yourself. And even if you have to go to the ER and make up a symptom, I don't care. Go and get it done because it's worth it. Because if it's caught early enough, it is a really, really treatable cancer. And mine wasn't even caught early, and it was a treatable cancer. But any changes in your digestion system too. I mean, it could be a lot of things, so don't jump to cancer. Get your scopes, and I have a bumper sticker that says, colon cancer survivor, just because I'm trying to make it like a subject that people talk about, because it's such an uncomfortable subject for so many people. And that's, I think, part of the reason why some don't really talk about it or share it with their doctor. Like, don't be embarrassed. Just talk and do what you have to do, and, make it more of just a part of the conversation in society.